Welcome to Discover Indie Film. I'm Jeff Howard, and I'm very happy to have Nick Livanos with me. Hey, Nick.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes. So we are on Zoom because Nick is in Tennessee. I'm in California, so we didn't drive and meet halfway. It would be fun if I could pull out of my head. We could have met probably somewhere in Utah, maybe halfway.
Yeah,
but
West Texas.
West Texas, yeah, El Paso. No,
yeah.
We could have met at the Alamo, but instead, here we are on Zoom. And if you want to learn, so Nick is talking to me because his film, All the Wrong Ingredients, won the Audience Award for Best Feature Film Comedy at Film Invasion Los Angeles in 2024. I'm the festival runner of that film, and that's why we did an interview. If you listen to the podcast before this one, you can hear a very fun interview where we really get to know Nick and about his film and what got him into film and actually how he ended up being a film studies, film production professor. But this podcast is not about that, although I'll also add that you should watch All the Wrong Ingredients, and there will be a clickable, in the show notes, there will be a clickable link where you can find out where to see it. Super fun movie. And listen to the podcast before this to learn just how unique and interesting it is. But this podcast, we're not even going to talk about your life and career anymore. We're going to talk about you're going to answer such a bad introduction. You're going to answer the Discover Indie Forum 4 questions, which are name 3 favorite films, just 3 films you love. It's no pressure to name the best 3 films you ever saw, and I know 3 is like not enough. We all love more than 3, but it's 3 we love. And then an underrated film, an overrated film, and a lesser known film that people should seek out. I imagine as someone with a bachelor's in film production and a master's in film production and who teaches film production, you've watched some movies. You've probably watched some movies.
Pressure now. I gotta have good picks now.
No. I hope
more
you
stressed
just
about.
Go with the what you. I'm joking, but like if you were a teenager in the 90s, I hope my favorite movie was, I used to want to have a guilty pleasure question, but I never added it. Then we'd have 5 questions and it would be less biblical for me. I enjoy the 4 questions. So anyway,
Yeah. All right.
You want to name 3 favorites? And if you really need to, you can always add a 4th.
What I almost wish I could do is I could think out loud through a bunch of them and then pick several of them. You would know I had thought of these other good ones, but I won't.
You can. You can say. You could say, well, is it? You can. I don't have a whistle. I'm not going to call a foul on you.
Okay. Well, then let me think a little bit because there are so many good ones. And I feel like there's going to be something probably I'm going to have this burden to sort of say something meaningful, historical, something good from the past, but also something good that it's just sort of it's going to stick with me forever, and maybe one that's a little bit more present tense. Let's do the past first, because I know that I didn't see It's a Wonderful Life till I was older, and that became this massive movie for me. I couldn't believe there was such a good movie that I hadn't seen that was so old. I just didn't. But I'm not going to pick that one. That is a good old one, but I think that's a little too obvious. And we just.
But it is much better than people assume because it just gets associated as a holiday film. It's a good film.
It's a pretty good movie,
really good
and I was shocked to see it and be like, "Whoa! Who's been keeping this from me? Why didn't I ever watch this at Christmas?"
And it's kind of challenging too, right? It's not. I think it's a good. But go on, I interrupted.
Yeah. It's I like it, and I think the other ones I think of, I thought about. So I'm not saying It's a Wonderful Life, and I'm also not saying Lawrence of Arabia, even though I could say both of those because they're both fantastic. I'm going to go with Treasure of the Sierra Madre. It's my historical pick for my categories in the 3. Treasure of the Sierra Madre because I think I love a great moral dilemma movie. And I also just love John Huston. John Huston did a couple other things that are pretty notable, like The African Queen and some other stuff. And he definitely played with these strong character things. He loved working with Humphrey Bogart, who did obviously great work. And I think that Treasure of the Sierra Madre is one that I continually these days have students who don't even know what it is. They have not heard those four words, treasure, or five words, treasure of the Sierra Madre, strung together. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I am teaching history of cinema this semester, and I sit down and make them watch it. This is just so good.
And they all appreciate it. And
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. I feel like, everything old, right, is like the acting just has these different sensibilities. What it meant to be a good actor then as Humphrey Bogart is just completely different. And even a few years later, when it's Marlon Brando, like who's like the hot stuff, and like it's just completely different. Once like the method enters the scene and Brando is doing it and James Dean is doing it, then all of a sudden we're like, that's good acting. And Bogart is still amazing, but it's just a slightly different sensibility. And that's just shifted continually through time. And now people think they hate method acting because their reference point for it is like Jared Leto or something. But the method is a very
I guess it gets complicated. But yeah, for sure. And well, I'll just add that.
Okay.
I was just going to add that even Bogart, yeah, it's a great choice. And like I'm a Casablanca person.
Yes. Yeah.
And he really actually goes a lot more subtle there.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, so without being over the top like James Dean screaming at
tearing me apart and everything, right?
Yeah. With nothing against that, but yeah, Bogart did show like depth soon after.
Yes. Yeah.
He truly did grow. So I always like to defend him, and I can't help but mention Casablanca too. So anyway,
anyway. But I'm picking Treasure of Sierra Madre as like an anchor for me, like something I really love. And I love the director's work. And I think I'm going to be something, I'm gonna sort of like think about directors here a little bit. Cause I also like, as I thought about it, I was like, man, I have this burden where like, I really like a couple like living and working French directors. Michel Gondry, who did like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and a couple other great movies. Some of them just as good, but like people haven't seen as much because that was his famous American one. And not all of them are in English. Also, Jean-Pierre Jeunet is another French guy who did Amélie. People love Amélie, but I also love Jean-Pierre Jeunet so much. I'd really love to like, how do I steal everything he's done and turn it into a movie for myself? I'd love to do that.
So we can bond over the City of Lost Children.
Yeah, like, and everything he's done is so fascinating and like compelling, and like, and he's just operating on this way that's sort of like again, to get like historical nerdy a little bit. Like he sort of embodies something about the French New Wave, something sort of playful and sort of like not what you'd expect, like just doing the movie in a way you didn't expect from the French New Wave, but kind of doing this whole new thing that's like it's influenced by like later movies from America, and like he lives in this generation completely, but is still doing his own thing that's really special. And I also really like Spike Jonze stuff. So Spike Jonze did Where the Wild Things Are, which is not even close to my favorite movie from him. I think like Her and Adaptation and Being John Malkovich sort of stand out. But like Spike Jonze, Where the Wild Things Are was like, he has Big Giant Monsters and Where the Wild Things Are. And there's the influence of that in my movie, All the Wrong Reads. We're like, those monsters, we want something like that. Get us like that meets a Muppet is what happened in our movie. So like directors are heads up, but I'm whittling it down. Two more into the actual category of like movies I'm picking for my list of like great movies. Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Children of Men. I come back to forever because I can't not like these things that Alfonso Cuarón has done. Maybe it's possible I like some of his other stuff even better, but I just keep coming back to Children of Men. And I had a really weird experience with it where I was not one of these people who was like frothing at the mouth, like how many like long oneers he did in that movie. I didn't notice the camera work. I was too ignorant when I first saw it to pay attention to the camera work. I just thought this is an amazing movie. I just thought that like the work that was done, like there's some really subtle stuff where like just a fascinating and stressful and emotionally compelling story moment. Clive Owen is slipping in mud. That's all. He's just trying to push a car, but he's slipping in mud. And because he's slipping, this little tiny thing that's happening is this like impressive story moment where it's like, yeah, oh gosh, of course he's slipping in the mud. Quick, get in the car, get it running, get away from the bad guys. And like little moments like that are happening all throughout in the midst of like this like super flamboyant and outrageous camera work that's happening too. But I actually really appreciate that somehow miraculously, as an ignorant young person, I didn't catch that there was this incredible camera work too. I just thought the movie was really operating at a high level.
The oneers are incredible, but also I love that he doesn't overdo it in that one. And
yeah,
I think that's one of the greatest films of our era, particularly because Clive Owen's character is one of the most heroic characters and strong characters I've ever seen, and he never picks up a weapon in a film with lots of action.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that. The thing that I always say um, is that it's weirdly a Christmas movie because, and I think if you rewatch it with that in mind, you will see all these little things where like Quaron, he knew also that it could be interpreted that way. I'm not saying he tried really hard to make it that way, but he knew what he was doing. And he comes from like some sort of a Christian background. He's got that sort of culturally in his blood. So I saw things, I was like, look at this right here. There's a like that movie is about how the birth of a baby could mean hope for all mankind. So I think that's how I call it a Christmas movie. But there's also these other little like things where like there's a shot where like right after the baby is born, where three people are standing there and they almost just sort of seem like three wise men or something. They almost just seem like three people coming to visit the baby. And the very first line in this shot that's like looking up from the baby's point of view at these three people, the guy goes, Jesus Christ. And I was like, that's so crazy.
Well, now I have a reason to watch it again
Yeah, I
soon.
mean it's imminently rewatchable on its own anyway, and it's like
It
another
truly
layer
is.
rewatchable as a Christmas movie.
It is absolutely amazing in every way. It really is a I mean to me it's a bit of it's close. There are a handful of films in the recent era that I consider somewhat perfect, and that one kind of is. I don't have any issue with anything in that film. I could watch it over and over and over.
Yeah, I love it.
Sure. All right, well you get one more.
I get one more because I've said a lot of them, but I haven't actually picked. I haven't picked.
Yeah, you've done a good job.
So I'm going to pick another one. I'm going to pick a David Fincher movie because he's done a lot of awesome work. And I'm going to pick Mank, which is more recent in his stuff. And it's just like I feel like it didn't make a big splash. It might fit in one of the other categories for these like the unsung type things. But I'm going to pick Mank just as like another one of my three like great movies. I don't know. I almost don't understand how he's so smart that he crafted that movie and put it together the way he did. And I think that Mank is a really great sort of like we've been a little nerdy and historical here, so we can be sort of like you sip your wine and you eat your cheese, and like they go together, whatever, like whichever your things are. And Mank go is like the perfect pairing with Citizen Kane, the supposed best movie of all time, right? So like, and I think you could watch them in either order. If you've never seen them, watch one, and then as soon as possible afterwards, watch the other one, and they just go together. Obviously, because Mank is about the writing of Citizen Kane, but also just like the filmmaking and how they are both made is meant. They're meant to be little mirrors to each other, and I think that it's incredible to me how Fincher did that in Mank without it seeming derivative, like that he was just copying Citizen Kane.
Yeah,
It's
it
like,
doesn't feel like an homage. It's a real film.
no, it's its own thing, but a lot of the language and grammar of film is tied into the grammar and language of Citizen Kane. It's super impressive. It's just a good movie, so it's a good watch, but it's also just like an intellectual masterpiece. I think if you're interested in that level of thing.
Agreed. And I just feel like also mentioning that I think I could watch Gary Oldman read a phone book.
Yeah,
I feel
whatever
like
he
Gary
wants.
Oldman is one of those. My wife and I actually have double binge Slow Horses on that Apple
Oh
TV
yeah.
Plus thing,
Huh?
and I every episode, at least once or twice, I have to hit pause and go, "How amazing is Gary Oldman?" I
He's
I, just,
so good.
I'm like I joke with him. I'm so glad that we're on the same planet as him.
Yeah, isn't it nice that we were born into existence with Gary
Like
Oldman?
like we could be in a world without Gary Oldman, and there'd be a little
That's like
less for
the
it.
worst world.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe this
Excellent.
is the brightest timeline because Gary Oldman is here.
Yeah. If there are an infinite number of multiverses, I'm glad I'm in the universe where Gary Oldman got on stage and then on screen. Because, man, all right. And that is a pretty fun idea to watch Mank and Citizen Kane together.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll
they,
make the
they
17
illuminate
year old
each
do it.
other, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, question number 2 is a film that you consider underrated.
This is a tough one because I feel like I met some really good people when I was touring my own movie, and I kind of want to think about their movie, but I feel like my pick is one that like I didn't talk to them very much, and they're like way out of my league by comparison. Um, I did while I was touring. There is a little There's a couple documentaries I saw that were really sort of pretty cool. One called "Mom and Dad's Nipple Factory," which I don't feel like I need to say anything else. I think that should be enough for anyone to go, I would like to know more. and and I don't think that more would disappoint you. Justin is the guy who made that movie, and I met Justin at Heartland Film Festival, if I'm allowed to say other film festivals. Um, and
I'm aware there's a couple of them out there. I think Film Freeway claims there's 12,000 film festivals in the world right now. So if there's a good one, mention it.
Yeah, I had a good time at Heartland seeing, I just like meeting Justin and seeing his movie. And then another guy I met at Heartland made a movie called Volcano Man that's all about his relationship with his dad. And Volcano Man is an Australian movie that's pretty fun. And I did some time. I had sort of a college year abroad in Australia, and so I have a lot of a lot of love for just like little uniquenesses of their culture there. I think it's fun to see Volcano Man, and it's great meeting the filmmakers. But here's my pick. This is like out of my league because I saw it at Sundance, and I'm happy to be a person who gets to sometimes attend Sundance and watch other people's movies. I don't want to misrepresent myself and suggest that I was ever there with my own film. I have not attained that level of street cred yet, although that's cool. Maybe one day. But there was a movie 2 years ago, I want to say, called Scrapper by a filmmaker named Charlotte Regan, and she was the most self-deprecating person I've ever seen up front. But Scrapper really, really moved me. I thought it was so sweet and tender, but also really, really funny, and a nice little simple film about a girl who sort of is thrown back into life with her young dad, who she's never known. And so she's been living on her own, that little scrapper. So what's she going to do when dad shows up? And so, yeah, check out Scrapper. I think all those movies are worth your time. But I think if I had to sort of settle on just one that's sort of like I keep talking about it. So I'm talking about it again here. Scrapper is my unsung pick because it didn't do like a huge American splash because it's a British film.
Oh, British. Excellent. Well, not feel free to continue, but I was going to say most of what you just named could easily be question four, which is a lesser known film that people should seek out.
But, what did I just answer?
Underrated.
Well, okay. Well, let's.
Were you actually answering lesser known that people should seek out?
Maybe I was.
I think you were.
Yes.
Because that's what Mom and Dad's Nipple Factory and Scrapper totally deserve.
Yes, absolutely. And Volcano Man, not to be.
And Volcano Man.
Yeah.
Excellent. 3 lesser knowns. And by the way, I should have this answer, but I think you're per filmmaker number, 248 who've been on this podcast so far.
Right.
And you're like the third or fourth person to name films they've seen on the festival circuit. And I think that's lovely. I think it's lovely to support other filmmakers.
There's just like the people who make them are just these brilliant people who are doing amazing work. And it's just happening at this level that's like it's just not adjacent to fame in any way. So you're going to have a harder time discovering it. And so if there's anything we can do to sort of like help people discover these really great ones, and there are so many, but you gotta listen to things like this. You gotta get out there to the film festivals yourself. Or you just gotta you gotta do a little more work to find those movies. And so hopefully we can be part of that thing. So I need to answer underrated.
Yeah, a film you consider underrated.
Man, that's tough.
And I admit that the underrated and overrated questions tend to have an eye on like awards and Oscars and things like, some films, I guess I'm giving you I'm leading you towards answers.
Oh, that's okay. That's helpful.
But you know what I mean? Like underrated. Sometimes there's a film that, the obvious scenario is 5 to 10 years later, everyone's like, well, that film should have won Best Picture and it didn't win anything.
Right. Oh man, I was just thinking about one of those recently. Like it should have won, but it didn't. Maybe that was Mank, actually. I don't know. It's like, how did Mank not win something? Can I say a TV show? I want to say a TV show.
Yeah, feel free.
There's a Netflix show called Glow that kind of came and went. Allison Brie.
I loved Glow.
I feel like it was one of these like character ensemble shows. And I guess it was a comedy, but it had a lot of drama. And it was a little bit of both. It was like dramedy. And it just got straight canceled. Like it was like in those early ways of like Netflix is trying to do TV at a high level. Hey, they're doing it. And then and I feel so sad that I just don't know. I don't know enough people who've actually seen Glow. I feel like, well, it's too bad that it got canceled when it did, because I think it was firing on all cylinders and it was great. I think the
It
character
was
work was great.
great.
The writing was fantastic. The acting was enjoyable, super entertaining. Um, but I wish I knew more people who'd actually seen it. No one to
Great
talk to Glow.
cast. I can add, I know this that because I was a big fan of a couple of the people on that show, and it was scheduled. They had the production schedule set for season. I think they did 2 seasons, and season
Yeah.
3 was scheduled, and COVID hit, and Netflix
Uh,
decided to kill it during COVID instead of just waiting and
that's
shooting
fun.
season 3 that had been written. I think it was season 3. They just didn't bring it back, probably because such a big cast, it was probably more expensive,
Yeah, probably a little bit
and it
expensive
wasn't getting the numbers of some other hits. They
for sure.
those those wonderful people at Netflix probably noticed that the Tiger King reality show got them way more attention than their
Yeah,
brilliantly scripted huge cast show Glow. But I will add that
that's a
I
shame.
love Glow, and that cast was excellent. And everyone went crazy for that rabbi show on Netflix this summer. The Nobody Wants This, about the non-Jewish
Yeah,
girl
I
who
actually
dates a
haven't
rabbi.
checked it out, but
It has some Glow people on it.
oh, okay. Let's see.
I only brought it up to mention that,
Uh,
like, at least they brought some of those wonderful. Yeah, Glow is fun, and amusingly, I actually am of the age. The gorgeous ladies of wrestling I was aware of as
yeah,
like a
like at the time.
13-year-old in Los Angeles. It was like on channel 52, and I was like, "Oh, I'll watch this." I never enjoyed wrestling.
I got a movie for you to add to that in case movies are the only thing allowed. If somebody out there is keeping score and it had to be a movie, go see the Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, amazing film, Joe versus the Volcano. This movie is not a movie everyone's going to tell you is like amazing and good. I think that I was like one of those things that like, for some reason, was like always on TV when I was younger. Like it was one of those you flip on the cable channels and like, oh, this is on again. So I've just seen it. I've seen it a million times. And I think Meg Ryan plays 3 different characters in the movie. She is super funny and like super charming, and it was like her like heyday. She was fantastic. And it's Tom Hanks. He's like
It's
America's
Tom
dad.
Hanks, and it was
Oh,
that great director, the writer director, the Moonstruck guy, right? I'm looking it up.
yes. Yeah,
Yes,
look at
John Patrick Shanley.
yeah. And so like it's this thing that like it just sort of like you don't hear about it. It's not going to get called like one of the great rom-coms of its time. But it's got a great little simple setup. It's real silly and funny. And it's just a movie. I think if you sat down and watched it, I just don't think you'd regret it. Underrated, underrated.
Excellent, excellent, underrated. And now I'll add, because you're a very kind person. You might not like the term overrated, but all we mean by overrated, we're not saying it's a bad film. We're saying it's a film that got praise and cultural acknowledgement and maybe even won Best Picture or something like that. And sometimes it's not even that filmmaker's best work. And it's like, oh, they just gave that the award because that director was owed a couple awards for the previous 2 films. So
Yeah.
that's my attempt to try to get you to say something negative about something. But it's not necessary. But if you want to pass on overrated, I ain't
I
gonna
don't.
stop you.
I feel like I'm playing the game, and I feel like passing is unfair. And it's not that I haven't thought of things. It's that I feel so bad saying it. Here's what I will say: is that these are just my opinions, and I'm wrong. I'm totally wrong. Obviously, just completely wrong. Um, but the things that came to mind when I thought about this type of category, for me, just me personally, was like how how I feel when I sit down and watch. The main thing I feel is that this movie is very, very long. Maybe it is also very good. Maybe it is excellent. Maybe it deserves every accolade it ever got. But The Lord of the Rings, to me, the feeling I feel the most is its length. And I feel like that first one, they hit that note where somebody's crying deeply several times. Someone is crying very hard several times. And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how many times I can respond to that and still respond in the same way. It's a pretty good movie. Is it as good as the whole world seemed to think it was? I don't know. I don't know.
I will pile on a bit and support you and say that I thought they were all brilliant when I first saw them, and brilliant probably when I saw them again. And then a little thing called Game of Thrones came along, and my wife, I had actually watched Game of Thrones, and then met my wife and introduced her to it, and so I saw the whole thing over again with her. And then we met a friend who had never seen it, watched the whole thing through with her, and when we finished that, she was like, I like coming to your house and watching, like, it was like a weekly, like every Sunday she'd come over at 8. We'd have dinner and then we'd watch movies or whatever. And then she's like, what should we watch now that we finished Game of Thrones? I'm like, we should watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And it felt dated and unengaging after the next level of fantasy that I had just been part of. I was almost like, wow, I almost wish they would remake Lord of the Rings now with a slightly more, what can I say? I think it didn't hold up like I expected it to.
Well, that's interesting. And I don't know, like it still works for a lot of people. It's really meaningful for a lot of people. And I resonate. Like they're good. They're good. I just sort of like, I think I could get a Blu-ray rip of that movie somehow. I don't know how, because I don't pirate movies, but probably that's doable. I could probably get my hands on a Blu-ray rip of that movie. And I want to believe I could cut a version of that movie that is more like the standard length of a movie, 90 minutes to 2 hours. I think I could cut that movie out of the existing movie, and people would watch my cut and feel like they've experienced the entire story. They're like, yeah, that's everything that happens in that story. You didn't miss anything that happens in the story. We miss things that we love. We miss maybe characters that we love, little moments, but not anything that's really the story.
I think you're right. I agree with you. And at the same time, I am aware that in a lot of ways, those films are so loyal to the books that they can edit them.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I think
right, like they serve a purpose as being so loyal to the books that they're almost like they had to be someone had to be super loyal to Tolkien. But my understanding is, this is a funny aside, I got into reading fantasy finally after age 50, and I actually said to friends, I think it was Game of Thrones, actually reading Song of Ice and Fire books. And I said to friends, what should I watch? Should I read Lord of the Rings? And all my friends who are big readers were like, no, don't read Lord of the Rings.
Don't.
Skip it.
Please
they were
don't.
like, skip it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? It's not like the pinnacle of fantasy? They're like, nope, read these. So I'll just make a pitch that everyone should read N.K. Jemisin's books because she's amazing.
She's done that Broken Earth trilogy is some serious stuff. Mm-hmm. That is some story writing right there. And I just finished a book called The Tainted Cup by a guy who does fantasy, and now I've forgotten his name because I just read it. I never had any of this stuff before. But The Tainted Cup is a book that is like a full-on murder mystery and a full-on fantasy, and it was pretty fun.
What was that called? I'm going to write it down.
Yeah, The Tainted Cup, definitely worth checking out.
Tainted Cup. By the way, I ain't going to pretend I'm not impressed that you've read the Broken Earth trilogy, because I think that is... It's hard for me to say I've ever read anything better than that trilogy. I've never read a trilogy that constantly I would be reading it, and then I would have to set the book down and walk into the next room and say, you don't know how good this book is. I wanted to tell everyone in the world that everyone in the world should read it. And it kind of breaks my heart because I believe that Sci-Fi Channel bought the rights. And whenever they do an adaptation, it's cheap and the budget's too low. And that trilogy, money and the time. That trilogy deserves Lord of the Rings budget.
Yeah, it needs HBO money and time.
It does need HBO money. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, well,
the first scene in the first book.
Those are strong books, and I feel like just such strong storytelling. And my thing is like I'm not really a fantasy person, so when fantasy captures me, I think, and maybe that's part of where like my Lord of the Rings little sort of like stuff comes from. Is like I just think fantasy is a difficult genre because it's so sincere. It's so unbelievably sincere, and at the same time, it's about like dragons and stuff, and like magic spells and wizards, and like that stuff's funny to me. Like that's not like real world stuff. How can we be so like haughty and sincere about stuff that's so funny? So I know I have that baggage, and anyone who disagrees with me can sort of just say I'm an idiot because of those things and many more things besides, I'm sure. But I think, yeah, like that's like it's a feat to me when like something fantasy captures my attention and really manages that. And those books, like man, it's hard to put them down. They're good stuff. I got another one for you. You didn't ask, but like in the overrated thing, because you phrased it the way you did, the thing that won, but maybe something else that filmmaker made should have won. That's the La La Land and Whiplash scenario to me. I use those movies as that example because La La Land is phenomenal. There's no argument that's great to me. I'm not going to say that's like overrated. I think that is rated correctly. But you know what's underrated? It's another underrated rating. It's like by comparison, Whiplash is underrated because Whiplash to me is better than La La Land. I think La La Land is amazing and everyone recognizes it is, and everyone who watched it needs to go watch Whiplash because it's even better.
Whiplash is a really special film.
Yeah.
Really is. And I like that you support La La Land too, because La La Land gets I mean, for a little while, La La Land was coming up as the overrated film all the time. And I
Yeah.
kept all right, we'll wrap up this podcast, but I will share my La La Land story because it's kind of fun, which is it got all the hype, so I watched it, and the first viewing I was disappointed. I'm like, I don't get it. And then my wife and I went on a cruise, and every night when we come home, we have that terrible habit of turning on the TV. So we go back to the cabin, turn on the TV, and there was a channel on the cruise ship that was basically La La Land 24 hours a day. So I turned it on, and I actually turned it on for the final 20-minute scene, right? Like the fantasy scene. And I was like crying. And then we come home the next night, and it's like half an hour. I basically watched it from like I watched the last quarter, and I watched the last half, then I watched the last three quarters, and then I finally caught it from beginning to end, and I'm like, this is one of the best films I've ever seen. I was like, I completely came around with multiple viewings, and
Yeah.
I was like, see, I was a real jerk the first time around because it had already, it had just beaten. What do you call it? It it had just beaten.
It had Moonlight was the one that actually won, right? Like Moonlight won.
Oh
But
yeah, Moonlight beat
like,
it. That's right. For a minute, it won Best Picture or whatever.
it was awkward, very awkward. I had an Oscars party that year, and we were like, okay, and just kind of started to like we muted it as that had happened. We were like, all right, it's done. And then like people were like, something's happening, and we turned it back on, and we're like, whoa,
A lot of Oscar pool money had to be redistributed.
yes,
All
yep,
right.
it's a great moment. I mean, a terrible moment for many, but like entertainment wise, I think it probably helped the show.
Faye Dunaway, right? Was it Faye Dunaway next to Warren Beatty?
Yes, I think that is correct.
Yeah, and she read it wrong, and then he put it
Was like,
together, and
okay,
he had to he had to go over to the microphone and say, "I'm about to ruin someone's night. Sorry." But yeah, funny.
cringe
Well,
funny, awkward
know,
funny.
it's better than a slap. So anyway, it's a better Oscar story than the darn slap. I wish the slap
I
never
don't
happened.
know. I don't know. I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist, but a lot of crazy things have happened to the Oscars, and let's just hope that they've got something equally crazy for us this year. If we're going to tune in, we see something wild.
Little value add. I grew up in the 70s. That's when there would be the occasional streaker. Maybe that we'll get a streaker this year. Something a little more light and fun.
Let's hope.
Better than random violence.
Yes, we don't need that. We don't need that.
All right, well, we ended on a funny note talking about the Oscar slap. But it works because when Whiplash, what's better than the Whiplash slapping?
Man, I don't know. It's so good. What's crazy about La La Land and Whiplash is they're kind of the same movie, like thematically, and they give you the same sort of like, I don't know what to feel. I don't know what to feel. Am I glad that things ended this way, or do I hate it? I feel both things. And I think that's the magic of both movies. I just think that Whiplash does it like even more amazingly for me.
For sure. And it also has like an indie vibe, and it feels very essential to me.
Yeah.
All right. I'll wrap it up. By letting everyone know if you go to the show notes for this podcast, there will be a clickable link to Nick's Instagram as well as his film All the Wrong Ingredients on justwatch.com so that you can watch that film and see what happens when someone who appreciates Mank and Children of Men and The Treasure of Sierra Madre and great shows like Glow and fun stuff like Joe versus the you'll see there's fun, lighthearted fun in Joe versus the Volcano. I remember that movie.
Yeah, I feel like that's your inroads to my movie.
that's your inroad. Watch that one right before All the Wrong Ingredients. All right, so those are the clickable show notes. And then also in the show notes, there'll be links to other stuff, including if you want to learn more about this podcast. Actually, you should be nice and like and subscribe to the podcast. If you want to learn more about this podcast or a TV series that was born out of it, go to discoverindiefilm.com. On social media, it's always at DIFwins. When I mention that TV series thing, just go to Amazon Prime Video, type in Discover Indie Film, and see what you see. It is, I won't go into it. So, Nick's film, that was a funny pause. Nick's film, All the Wrong Ingredients, won an award at Film Invasion Los Angeles. We hold that festival every June. You can learn more at filminvasionla.com, and it's at Film Invasion LA on social media. And its sister festival, which is the Sherman Oaks Film Festival, is every December. Just had it, actually, a couple weeks ago. That's where I got sick. But you can learn about that one at ShermanOaksFF.com, and it's at ShermanOaksFF on social media. And finally, if you enjoy indie film, just go to indiechannel.tv and give it a try. See what you see. View without prejudice. I'll steal from George Michael a little.
I like that.
All right. Nick, thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. This is awesome.
Jeff, thank you. Thank you to everyone who listened.